Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Behind the Headlines, where we're going to be discussing recent developments in the conflict between Israel and Iran, particularly honing in on the moral courage that has been showed by President Donald Trump in launching a full-scale attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. With much opposition from both right and left, Donald Trump persisted, and the president ordered an assault on that nuclear program, which has long threatened not only Israel, but indeed the rest of the world. I'm Reagan King, and joined as always by my good friend and co-host Simon Barrett.
Yeah, good to see you, Reagan, on what I can only describe as biblical and historical days in which we're living in. I'm so pleased that President Trump had the bravery and the courage to send those B-2 bombers to actually go and destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, particularly knowing the amount of domestic and international pressure that he was under. It means that Israel are not doing this alone, that they have the United States as a world superpower to back them. And just seeing what America's done is so significant, because essentially what we're seeing is that both of them, Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump, have stared evil in the face. And we could see that we are living in such historic times with the collapse of the Islamic Republic of Iran, this totalitarian regime that's brought nothing but terror and misery on the world. Actually, its days are numbered, just like we saw the collapse of the Soviet Union with the fall of the Berlin Wall in '89, and then the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991.
And this is something we have been looking forward to. I was refreshing my memory as to how often we've talked about this exact scenario playing out, and it goes back to the inception of, well, the reincarnation, we can say, of Behind the Headlines. I know you had this some years ago, but for 4 years, we've done programs together specifically on Iran and Israel and the threat this nuclear program has posed, particularly to Israel. And we've been talking and we've been speculating and we've been projecting, and it's been increasing to this point where, you know, we're both quite confident that we're looking not only at disabling of Iran's nuclear capacity, we're looking at the very real likelihood of regime change in Iran in the very, very near future.
And I definitely think that's the objective of Benjamin Netanyahu, and I think now it's become the objective of President Trump as well, knowing that Iran with nuclear weapons is probably one of the world's most dangerous scenarios. These Islamic and Nazi fascists have control and the ability to fire nuclear weapons, then no doubt that they will. But let's put the story in context. So we see that last week, President Trump had the moral courage to actually decide to actually help Israel and take out Iran's nuclear weapons program. We see that in the early hours of Sunday, the 22nd of June, the B-52s, known as the Spirit stealth bombers, delivered their massive 14 GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Predator, known as the MOP, bombs, known as a 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs, to target the top secret Fordow nuclear site, which was concealed deep within the mountain. Additionally, 2 other nuclear sites were also destroyed, with 30 US Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from a US submarine located 400 miles away. The Mail also reports that out of this, that Donald Trump has been threatened with domestic terrorism, that Iran will unleash terror cells against the United States if President Trump went ahead and ordered airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. And we're also seeing that within Trump's own movement, the MAGA movement, there's been so much opposition, America first, that America shouldn't intervene in international and world affairs. And yet we see here Trump act decisively.
Well, here's the reality of it, Simon. Within MAGA, there's multiple wings of movement and ideology, and there is a very strong and radical anti-Semitic wing as well that is blatantly anti-Israel. They're pro-Trump in theory, but when it comes to his support for Israel, they view it as a massive blind spot. And so what we're seeing is Trump has not paid any attention to their harping on against Netanyahu and Israel, and the possibility of intervening not only on behalf of Israel but on behalf of the world in relation to Iran's ongoing full-blown breach of its non-proliferation agreements in relation to enriching uranium. And so this has been something that was revealed, it was threatened. We've talked even before, just last week, we were talking about how Trump, alongside Israel, pulled the wool over many people's eyes, looking at this kind of, we did a program, can Israel trust or rely on Trump? Because it looked like he did visit the Middle East and didn't even stop by Israel. It looked like there's something strange going on, but it's all part of the strategy. It's all part of the plan. He's done it again. 2 weeks, he said. I'm giving you 2 weeks, and then we'll decide whether or not to strike. Obviously, Iran is not going to change its position. Iran, we have to remember, is ideologically sworn to continue to fight and resist, not just against Israel, against the world until Islam conquers all. That's its ideological desire.
It is, but within that framework, you still have the leadership of the IRGC and others that have been virtually wiped out. And when they're in this situation, it's survival mode. And so therefore, however much they'd like to be principled and think that they would die as martyrs, and
the backs are against the wall.
Exactly. So the question is, what would they do in kind of response? Now, I think Simon Wallis Simons sums it up extremely well in the Telegraph when he wrote, if Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu are not awarded a Nobel Peace Prize, the institution no longer holds any meaning. They deserve recognition. The American bombing on Iran's nuclear program was the single greatest intervention for global peace we have witnessed in our lifetimes.
I think that's correct.
And so I think that sums up the moral courage shown by Benjamin Netanyahu and, of course, now Donald Trump, because they have no doubt made the world a safer place. So let's have a look at and remind ourselves of the threats of the Islamic Republic of Iran as posed to Israel, the Middle East, and the world over the past 46 years.
Iran isn't just a threat to Israel, they're a threat to the entire world. For years, they've outsourced terror like it's a business model, arming proxies to do their dirty work across the globe. Their terror campaign didn't start with Israel. 1983, Beirut, 241 American servicemen killed by Hezbollah, one of Iran's favorite proxies. 1992, Buenos Aires, Iranian-backed terrorists bombed the Israeli embassy, killing 29 and injuring 200. 1994, again Buenos Aires, same playbook. A Jewish center bombed, 85 people dead, and yes, the Iranian regime's fingerprints are all over it. 2012, Bangkok, a botched Iranian assassination attempt on Israeli diplomats. Although it was a failure, the intent was loud and clear. 2015, Iran supplied weapons and training to Houthi rebels, leading to attacks on Saudi Arabia and other regional targets. 2020, we can't forget, Iran launched ballistic missiles at US military bases in Iraq. See the pattern? This isn't just about the Middle East. Iran's reach is global. Their proxies, plans, and explosives span continents. You can ignore it until their terror reaches you.
Well, with many thanks to the IDF for that helpful, very brief, concise, comprehensive unpacking of the global threat that the Iranian regime has posed. And it's just something that's been crystal clear over the years, Simon. They don't even touch on all of the attacks on Israel itself there. The goal there is to show the global threat. You know, we've had hundreds and thousands of rockets fired upon Israel, upon civilian targets in recent years, directly as a result of Iran's endeavors and its aggression against what it calls the evil Zionist entity. And, you know, it's sworn to destroy that, but we've now seen the nuclear weaponry taken out of their hands.
Absolutely. So do you want to read the scripture?
Yeah, let's. So there's a great passage here, Deuteronomy 20, verse 2 through 4. So it shall be when you are on the verge of battle, and the priest shall approach and speak to the people, and he shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are on the verge of battle with your enemies. Do not let fear faint, do not be afraid, and do not tremble or be terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. And we've seen throughout history, we see even right now, how God is working out his perfect plan and purpose, right? He is not going to allow the people who he promised to bring home back to their own land be cast out again. And so we see multiple indications of miraculous working in this season, and what's occurred just in this past week, where we've seen Iran dealt a devastating blow. The Iranian regime dealt a devastating blow that could lead to a complete overthrow of its regime.
No, absolutely. And I thought this scripture also reflects on the fact that maybe those pilots belonging to the Israeli Air Force would have read Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 2 and 4, to not be afraid, because what Israel has achieved is not only air superiority, but they've faced a nation 20 times bigger than the nation of Israel. Israel's population was about 10, 11 million, whilst Iran's is about 90 to 91 million, and is the most powerful military force in the Middle East, and the most fanatical as well. So to be able to take on the Iranian regime almost single-handedly until the Americans got involved only on Sunday is nothing less than absolutely remarkable, considering the size of Israel and the capabilities of Israel to take out the Iranian regime will go down in military history. But I think it's also important to reflect on that what we're actually seeing as we see history unfold before our eyes. And it's very similar to that of the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And there's something very heartwarming when you see evil being destroyed. Of course, any loss of life is horrific, and we don't want to see any loss of life, but it's great to see that evil demonic regimes like Iran are on the verge of collapse, because God is dealing with them.
Look, throughout the scriptures we see that reality. God does not desire, he doesn't take any joy in the death of the wicked. At the same time, and that coexists alongside the truth that God does bring about the death of the wicked. He does not take joy in the death of the wicked, but because he is good and because he is just and because he is righteous and because he is holy, he does not tolerate the ongoing presence of evil and wickedness, particularly when that evil and wickedness continually oppresses his people. And so we see the Iranian regime has, and it remains one of the leading most dangerous governments for Christians to be under in Iran. We see it is a continual threat to the Jewish people. We see it continually is sponsoring and leading to horrific actions of terror around the world. And so this is something that you're exactly right, Simon. We're living in days of tectonic shifting. We're living in a time in which we can see God working in and through so clearly all that is going on in history to accomplish his perfect plan and purpose, to bring about the desolation of wickedness, to bring about that which is the downfall, leads to the downfall of such evil regimes. We have to be morally clear on this.
No, absolutely. And of course, we've got to understand what the world would have been like had Israel and the United States not taken action to take that threat, not only away from Israel, but also the world. Because if the Iranians had nuclear weapons, this regime with this ideology would have used them, or they would have given small, dirty nuclear devices to their terror proxies to carry out an attack on Israel, or to blow up London, New York, Washington, D.C., Rome, or even Paris. And so therefore there has to be the understanding that the enemies of Israel are also enemies of the West, something that Trump knows very well, but sadly very few of our Western leaders, including our own government and our own Prime Minister, do not understand evil. They don't understand the nature of evil. But also, worse than this, they decide to align themselves with evil because, the RAF could have easily taken part together with the Americans and the Israelis to actually prevent Iran from acquiring the world's most deadly weapon.
Well, indeed, the UK, as an ally of the United States and Israel, was informed in advance of this strike that was going to be carried out, and the UK could have given an unequivocal supportive an unequivocal act of support would have been ideal. The UK could have gotten involved in some way, but we continue to have a government that will give lip service to the idea of, we're supportive of our allies. They're often vague statements, but let's get around the negotiating table. Let's bring everything back to the negotiating table and just hopefully resolve things. There's still an off-ramp, David Lammy was saying, for peace talks and stuff. And there's a parallel reality that these individuals seem to be living in, where the definition of insanity is doing the same thing multiple times and expecting a different outcome. How many times have there been attempts for reconciliation, for peace, for getting around the table? We've had years of this. Simon, going all of the way back to Bill Clinton, we've had president after president saying, we need to talk about this. We need to make deals. We need to get around the peace table. We need to sort this out. We won't allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons. We won't allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons. Iran was being allowed to develop nuclear weapons. The only individual who's actually stepped forward and done something about it, despite much opposition, it has to be said, has been President Trump.
Absolutely, and he deserves an incredible amount of credit for that as well. So let's have a look at this CBN News report titled Ayatollah on the Edge of a Dangerous Miscalculation. And this was prior to the surprise attack by the US Air Force on Iran's nuclear facilities.
Ayatollah Ali Khamenei digs in his heels after Trump calls on Iran to surrender. Posting on social media, the supreme leader announced the battle begins. Ali returns to Khaybar with his Zulfiqar. The references to the 7th century and the first Shia Imam Ali, who conquered the Jewish town of Khaybar by sword. Joining us with more is Greg Roman, executive director of the Middle East Forum. Greg, Khamenei, his country is weakened. He's no match for the Israeli Air Force, which now has free reign over the skies of Iran. The Times of Israel reports that one Iranian official described the Ayatollah's risk of miscalculation as extremely dangerous. Now, you've been following this for years. So is he likely to surrender or try to usher in an apocalyptic end with the return of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi?
We have to look at what's happening with his background and the officers who have been advising him. The entire command and control structure of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is now gone. People who were advising him the day before the war are no longer in their place, and even their replacements are gone. The only person that's left at the top, very much alone, and even having given orders to a committee of the IRGC to run Iran in case of his demise, is now situated in such a point that in one direction he may capitulate and surrender, in the other he may decide to go all the way. But either way, I think right now he's feeling very lonely at the top, and I think his decisions will be made in such a way that's best for his preservation, not for the preservation of the Islamic Republic.
Yes, it's like calling in a security meeting and nobody shows up. There's no one in the room other than him. So Israel needs U.S. involvement, of course, to take out hard-to-reach underground nuclear enrichment facilities like the Fordow facility in Qum.
24 kilometers northeast of Qum is the Fordow fuel enrichment plant. The fuel being uranium with the capacity to be enriched to weapons-grade levels of 90%.
What we're talking about is a specific American weapon, which is 30,000-pound precision-guided bomb, and it can only be carried by the B-2 stealth bomber right now, because that's the only plane that's configured to carry such a weapon.
So what happens if the U.S. does not join Israel and provide those bunker buster bombs?
Well, Israel has in its battle plans ways in which to disrupt Fordow's operations in Qom in such a way that it can prevent access to the facility rather than to destroy the facility. We already said this took place in Isfahan and in Natanz, where they bombed the entrances to the underground enrichment facilities, and they also bombed the areas that were providing the supply of electricity. So this notion that you have to destroy the facility by bombing it is one which is a misnomer, insofar as if you're able to cut off the power supply, the centrifuges which are running could be disrupted. And the Israelis have done this before, not using kinetic means. The Stuxnet virus back in 2012 was a way in which to indirectly damage the facility rather than destroying it outright. So it does have other options in case the United States makes the decision to not get kinetically involved.
Well, polls show that most Americans agree that Iran's nuclear program poses a security threat to the United States. However, many do not want to see the United States get involved in another protracted Middle East war. Iran warns it will respond if the U.S. joins the fight. And Iranian state television reported a surprise is coming that the world will remember for centuries. So what are they talking about, Greg? Do they already have a nuclear bomb? How great is their retaliatory capability to harm America?
I don't trust the Iranian rhetoric and propaganda that's coming out of Tehran right now. In fact, we saw that their main broadcasting building was bombed. A symbol of the revolution's ability to try to broadcast its message is now in smithereens. But beyond that, the Iranians do have three significant retaliatory options that the U.S. should be worried about. The first, as you just mentioned, is the missile threat. The second is the unconventional threat, not just the nuclear bomb, but the potential use of a radiological or dirty bomb that can be on the top of a missile or brought in by other unconventional means. But the biggest threat that the U.S. has to worry about now with its bases overseas and also here at home is Iranian sleeper cells and their ability to wage asymmetrical warfare, the type that killed thousands of American soldiers in Iraq, and the way in which it has also used over the last 46 years to wage terror attacks against Western targets. So the U.S. doesn't just have to be on guard in the region, it also has to be on guard here at home. And that's regardless of whether the U.S. attacks Iran or not. Iran is in a position right now like a feral cat. It's going to lash out, and we don't know how it's going to happen, but we have to be on guard everywhere.
And Greg, the son of the late Shah, Reza Pahlavi, is considered a leading candidate to lead Iran if the regime falls.
The regime's apparatus of repression is falling apart. All that is needed is popular uprising to end this nightmare once and for all. Now is the time to resist. Now is the time to reclaim Iran.
He says the time is now for an uprising, but so far it's yet to materialize. The streets of the capital, Tehran, are empty. Some Iranians I've talked to say they don't want Pahlavi and a return to the monarchy of 50 years ago. So how are the Iranian people responding to all of this?
Well, the best way for the Iranian, especially the opposition, the Iranian people and its opposition outside the country to connect with people inside the country is to use non-kinetic means. There are entities that exist within the country, whether it be the Bus Drivers Transportation Committee, the truck drivers that were just leading a strike for the past 2 weeks, or even local neighborhood councils, which are all able to organize on a local level. And it's not necessarily going to be the Crown Prince who has the ability to do this, even though he is a very important part of a future transition to a democratic Iran or a government of Iran that's different from those ruled by the Ayatollahs right now. But it requires the U.S. to adopt a policy to allow those opposition groups to unify with those inside the country. And when it becomes U.S. policy to do so, I think you'll see the ability to have a controlled implosion of the regime rather than the chaos that may result if there's not any Western guidance for that process to take place.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Greg Roman, Middle East Forum Executive Director. Thanks, Greg. It's always a good time talking with you. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary.
Oh, it's fantastic just to see how God is working and using this. And, you know, I woke up on Sunday morning and I regularly check just to make sure family and friends are okay and see what's going on. And I saw the news and thought, yeah, it's high time that this was done, and it was really good news to see for everyone, as we've been talking about, not just for Israel. This is about for the world. It's for the Iranian people. It's for Israel. It's for the United States, for Great Britain, for the world.
Absolutely.
Now, last week, I was forwarded by someone, actually I saw it as a result of a Jewish friend who is a massive campaigner for hostages and families for him and whatnot. And she shared the words of the U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, a man from my own home state, and a man who my dad knew and worked with back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s. And he is now the U.S. Ambassador to Israel. And he sent what I found was a very moving text message to President Trump that obviously had a massive impact upon his decision to deploy the U.S. Air Force to destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program. He's there, Simon, for such a time as this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think he's a modern kind of Mordecai. It's probably the best biblical description to have of Mike Huckabee.
I read the text and I thought, this man is in post, no equivocation. He is a godly man. He loves God. He loves the Lord. He's actively approaching his role with a love for Israel and for its people, and with the desire that right is done. And so there's no better person for that role. I don't think he was a pastor as well previously. Do you want to share?
Yeah, so let's with our viewers who don't actually are aware of this profound and significant text message that Mike Huckabee, America's ambassador to Israel, sent President Donald Trump last week, that no doubt had a big impact on him and his decision to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. It reads as this: Mr. President, God spared you in Butler, PA, to be the most consequential president in a century, maybe ever. The decisions on your shoulders I would not want to be made by anyone else. You have many voices speaking to you, sir, but there's only one voice that matters, his voice. I am your appointed servant in the land and I'm available to you, but I do not want to try to get in your presence often because I trust your instincts. No, President, in my lifetime there has been no position like yours, not since Truman in 1945. I don't reach out to persuade you, only to encourage you. I believe that you will hear from heaven, and that voice is far more important than mine or anyone else. You sent me to Israel to be your eyes, ears, and voice, and to make sure our flag flies above our embassy. My job is to be the last one to leave. I will not abandon this post. Our flag will not come down. You did not seek this moment. This moment sought you. It's my honor to serve you, Mike Huckabee. I mean, what an incredible text message to send the US President Donald Trump, telling him to only listen to the voice of God when he had millions of voices telling him what he should do.
And he's had many voices since then condemning from both the right and the left, saying, this is a needless escalation, but this is complete nonsense. It's not an escalation at all. It's actually inhibiting an escalation. It is keeping a further escalation from happening. If you want escalation, let's introduce some nuclear weapons to the scenario. And that's exactly what the U.S. has done in taking out that capacity and that ability from the Iranian regime. And so it's difficult, for people to observe, but sometimes, you cannot have peace in this sort of scenario unless actual action is taken.
Peace through
Enough
strength.
of talking. Enough of the talking and getting around tables.
But the thing is not about talking, is it? Because we know that this is the tactic of the Iranian regime.
Yeah.
They want to spin out and drag out the negotiations so that they can have that nuclear breakout. Once they have a nuclear breakout, they have nuclear weapons. Our government, with our Foreign Secretary David Lammy, thinking that military action won't achieve anything. Well, got news for David Lammy. It has stopped Iran's nuclear weapons program, something the negotiations never would have. The Iranians will not come to the negotiations in good faith. They lie, they deceive, and they manipulate.
But he won't appreciate that because he's completely naive to the ideological background of Iran's Islamism. He denies it.
Yeah, well then all for him and our country, and this is why our country is not one of the leading nations to confront the evil that is the Iranian regime. No doubt that incredible text message that was sent by America's ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, to Donald Trump last week had a huge impact on the decision that President Donald Trump would make in order to actually attack Iran's nuclear facilities. And this happened last Saturday night, where President Trump spoke in front of the cameras and the American nation to say that he was launching these airstrikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. And this is courtesy of the White House.
Thank you very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisen-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say, we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel. And God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, it's fantastic there from President Donald Trump, and it's clear, it's comprehensive, it's concise. You know, I think we're seeing in this case particularly, Simon, a real degree of moral clarity. You know, don't fully know if he has his full team supporting him or behind him on this, but we do know that he's acted with resolve, and there are people who've been praying for him. This is the difficulty, you know, where over the years we've seen a great deal of question, and there's critique, and that's all warranted. But we have the duty to pray for our leaders, and I think what we've seen here is answer to prayer, that there's been wisdom granted and given, that they have involved themselves in this particular way. We can continue to pray that God would give much grace, and that there would be a real and lasting, meaningful peace between Iran and Israel, even as the scriptures highlight and promise.
Absolutely, and also we have to acknowledge that even America's great president Ronald Reagan didn't confront the Iranian regime when he was US president, particularly after the Marine barracks attack, which killed 241 US Marines.
Correct.
In 82 and 83, and also the attack on the US Embassy, or even the William Buckley, who was a CIA station chief in Beirut, was kidnapped and murdered by Iranian agents. And even then, the US did not respond to Iranian aggression. So he's the only president ever since the Ayatollahs came to power in '79 that have actually directly taken on this Iranian regime.
They've been storing up a great deal of wrath for themselves.
Absolutely.
There's been patience, there's been time, and now their time has come.
So let's unpack now what happened on the early hours of Sunday, the 22nd of June, as reported by the Daily Mail under this headline. How Trump used 14 bunker buster bombs and 30 Tomahawk missiles to obliterate Iran's nuclear sites. So the Daily Mail report that it was Iran's top secret Fordow nuclear site with 14 massive 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs and 2 other nuclear sites in Iran were wiped out, with 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from a US submarine that was 400 miles away. They say the details first revealed by Sean Hannity of Fox News, who spoke to the president shortly after the strikes. Hannity added that he had been told by Trump officials that Fordow was gone. The extent of the devastating bombing mission was later confirmed by the US military official, who suggested that Fordow had been taken off the table. It has previously been suggested that only 2 bunker busters would be needed to destroy the site. A dozen B-2 stealth bombers were used to deliver the bunker buster bombs. I mean, this technology is absolutely sensational. To know that Fordow was buried deep in an Iranian mountain. That's why the Israelis left this target for the Americans, because the Americans are the only one that had that bunker busting bomb that could destroy the Fordow nuclear site. And this was described as the jewel in the crown of Iran's nuclear weapons program.
There had to be that appeal made to President Trump, and this was the concern that Israel, though it had accomplished a great deal and had set the Iranian regime back probably some years in its program, there was still the reality of the Fordow site, and that was why the bunker buster bombs were needed in order to accomplish an assured victory, essentially.
Absolutely. So let's unpack for our viewers the actual military aircraft that was used to destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program, the B-2. So it's called the B-2 Spirit Stealth Bomber. And it was the B-2 stealth bomber, we can see on screen now, which was the only one capable of the American arsenal to actually take out Iran's nuclear facilities, and it was deployed on Sunday, the 22nd of June. So it had with it a precision guided, was designed to attack deeply buried and hardened bunkers and tunnels. According to the US Air Force, military experts say it can penetrate about 200 feet below the surface before going off. The bombs can be dropped one after another, effectively drilling deeper and deeper into the ground with every successive blast.
On a Saturday morning, the B-2 stealth bombers left from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and flew non-stop for about 37 hours, refueling several times. The B-2, which is capable of carrying nuclear warheads, is only flown by the Air Force and is produced by Northrop Grumman. Its first saw action in 1999 in the Kosovo War and is rarely used by the U.S. military in combat, as each aircraft is worth around $1 billion US. The strategic heavy bomber has a range of about 7,000 miles without refueling and 11,500 miles with one refueling, and can reach any point in the world within hours. Prior to the attack in Iran, the military used the warplane in October of last year to combat Yemen's Houthi rebels and their underground bunkers as well, and has dropped bombs in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya also.
Oh, quite a scary looking aircraft, and also has that ability to be undetected by radar, and that's why it's called a stealth bomber. Let's unpack though Operation Midnight Hammer, and this is the code name for America's preemptive strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. So the Sun reported on Sunday the 22nd of June under the following headline: Hammer blow. Very appropriate. Inside Operation Midnight Hammer, how Trump carried out an unprecedented attack on Iran using a decoy in a 37-hour covert mission. It says America's colossal bomb raid on Iran's key nuclear sites was a masterclass in military might and strategy, months in the making, officials say. The Sun continued to report that covert tactics and the world's biggest conventional bombs came together in spectacular success, according to Trump, which caught the Iranians completely off guard. Iran has sworn everlasting consequences and are coming, but Trump warned the US would not be afraid of striking again. It says while the world waits to see how Iran and its axis of evil will respond, the US has shared details of its daring Operation Midnight Hammer. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said the following: "This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force."
With Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth following on saying our B-2s went in and out and back without the world knowing it all. Planes were worked up for months, and the key groundwork was laid by Trump on Thursday when he announced a 2-week delay to his decision about striking Iran. It's now clear that that was a ploy to lull the regime into a false sense of security, sticking to script, Israel feigning frustration and vowing to strike Fordow without the U.S. support they must have known was coming. The full mobilization began on Friday night when a unit of B-2 bombers took off from the U.S. at midnight, some of the planes flying west towards the Pacific, leading analysts to suggest they might be heading to the Diego Garcia base. But that was a decoy. Only an extremely small number of planners and key leaders knew the truth about the ruse, according to General Kane, and the actual operative fleet comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, which quietly set off east over the Atlantic. Each was manned by a crew of 2, but the pilots were instructed to stick to minimal communication to avoid detection.
Which is absolutely incredible. And to actually fly 37 hours, a 2-man crew, being escorted by American fueling aircraft so that the stealth fighter could actually then refuel to go all that way. And this is something that I think the Americans would have absolutely loved to have had during the Second World War, to have an aircraft that could take off from an American airbase in Missouri to go all the way over to Iran to attack Iran's nuclear facilities, and having done that, return safely back into American airspace. Yeah, it's incredible.
Well, the journey to reach the target zone was 18 hours straight. So it took 18 hours to get there. Multiple refuelings were needed as well between the planes in the air. They do that in the air by linking up with escort and support aircraft. That all is very difficult enough as it is in relation to the synchronization, but even more tricky when you don't have particularly fluid comms. So at midnight Iranian time, U.S. submarines launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles at the Isfahan nuclear site in East Iran, coinciding with the bomber squad entering Iranian airspace undetected. A masterclass of strategy here. Decoy and scout planes swooped out ahead of the main unit to scan for and distract any awaiting Iranian defense jets, but there were none. Simon, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and its capacity air-wise is very limited. These guys are still using quite dated aircraft that would not hold a candle to any scout aircraft.
I've heard the Iranians have like the F-12s, the one that the Shah managed to acquire of the Americans in the 1970s. So their technology is out of dated. Maybe there might be a few Russian MiGs, but the fact is that Israel won air superiority the week before. Would enable then the Americans to fly over Iranian space and not face any kind of
single shot
confrontation or whatsoever.
Not a single shot was fired.
Amazing, isn't
Not a single shot was fired at the operatives. Go time was 2:10 a.m., the darkest hour of the Iranian night. Over a period of 25 minutes, the bombers released their powerful payload, with officials revealing about 75 precision-guided weapons were unleashed in total. Amongst these were 14 of the famed bunker buster bombs dropped on the mountain fortress Fordow plant. Israel, having not even attempted to destroy this facility, as it's buried beneath 300 feet of rock and steel, because it knew only the U.S.'s super bombs could do the job. We're talking one grade below nuclear weaponry here, right? That's the power of these particular bombs. That's also these stealth bombers. The next grade up is a nuclear weapon. So this is an immensely precise bomb that is able to penetrate very, very deep into mountains, into rock before exploding, about 200 feet.
And the accuracy is incredible. Say from the height that they would then drop these bombs, they're able to drop them into what would be probably a tire belonging to a truck. That just shows you their absolute precision to actually hit their targets. So we also see, for example, that Jake Wallis Simons, writing for the Daily Telegraph under the headline, Trump has just secured the best chance for global peace. The American bombing of Iran's nuclear program is a heroic act that should be widely celebrated. Writing in the Daily Telegraph, he says that if Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are not awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the institution no longer holds any meaning. Give one to them. The American bombing of Iran's nuclear program was the single greatest intervention on behalf of global peace we have seen in our lifetimes. CND may have hilariously condemned the most effective non-proliferation campaign in history, the irony. But it goes without saying that the world is a much safer place when we woke up this morning than it was when we went to bed last night. Israeli intelligence revealed that the Ayatollah's plan was to produce a set of small nuclear bombs, what chances that they would then not have been fired at Paris, New York and London by Iran or a proxies.
A nuclear Iran would also be a game changer in the region, although Israel had spectacularly decimated the regime's proxy militia, especially Hezbollah, in recent months. The regime was already taking steps to rebuild its ring of fire, is what it's been called, and a nuclear umbrella would have been provided a degree of immunity to the most fanatical militia on earth and emboldened every other rogue state on the planet. But it's not just about nukes. The defanging of the Iranian regime, which is now likely staggering towards its demise, represents nothing other than the collapse of the main pillar of global jihadism. For decades, Tehran has been the head of the octopus behind all the bloodthirsty fanaticism from Lebanon to Yemen, Iraq to the streets of London, of course with Qatar remaining, but the wind now in the sails of the righteous.
Incredible. He goes on to write, the fallout of Trump's historic intervention is yet to fully unfold, but it's undeniable that the legs have finally been kicked out under the monster of jihad. It's unlikely that the Ayatollahs will survive the week, either due to an uprising from the downtrodden Iranian masses or the hardliners. And all of this is a case of profound celebration. We are watching the dawning of a new era. Although there will be much sorrow, there is every hope it will be one of peace. When Trump-Netanyahu attacks most visibly exposed, however, is the woeful spiritual condition of Britain and Europe. Sir Keir Starmer's most recent contribution to the war effort was to refuse to deploy the RAF in Israel's defence. His neo-pacifism was rewarded with a sabotage attack at Braze Norton. His Attorney General, meanwhile, fresh from giving away the very Chagos Islands from where the American planes took off, advised that striking Iran would break international law. He then says, this summed it up. Winston Churchill might have been addressing the Starmer government as well as the Neville Chamberlain government when he pointed out, you were given the choice between war and dishonour. You chose dishonour and you will have war. It's only the boldness of Jerusalem and Washington that has saved us from this awful fate.
And thank God somebody hasn't forgotten their courage, he concludes. In civil society, meanwhile, were yesterday treated, and this was in relation to Saturday, I was out grilling outside our church building, and I saw people en route with abhorrent signs to one of these protests organized again by Palestine Action, crowds protesting in support of the Ayatollah. This is where we're at, Simon. Crowds protesting in support of the leading cause of global terror. Crowds supporting the Ayatollah. Crowds supporting a brutalistic, anti-woman, evil regime that seeks to completely eradicate any vestige of opposing viewpoint within its borders.
Absolutely, and they've lost moral clarity because they realise that they hate Israel, and so therefore their hatred of Israel makes them more sympathetic to the Iranians, and they see that the Israelis are attacking Iran and Iran's nuclear facilities, so therefore they want to stand in defiance with the Ayatollah Khomeini and this vile and evil totalitarian Islamic Republic of Iran, and in doing so put themselves on the wrong side of history because they don't have the moral clarity to understand. But I'm sure if you were given them a chance to say, would you like to live under this oppressive dictatorship, the answer would be no, because they do not know what these people are like or what they're capable of doing.
We had placards showing the face of the Ayatollah saying, choose the right side of history. This is where we're at. Complete inversion of truth, complete inversion of the reality of what's going on. But it is tempting. It is tempting to conclude, he says, that Britain is lost. While European leaders wagged fingers, quivered in their beds, the citizens of the Middle East only democracy demonstrated what may be achieved in a country that has not discarded its old loaves of flag, faith, and family as we've done. And we're just seeing some massive shifting, are we not?
Absolutely, but I think we also have to comprehend the amount of pressure that Donald Trump was under, the likes of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen within the MAGA movement in the United States, as well as other MAGA Americans that have been very critical of Trump, not wanting him to get involved in any foreign wars. We also see that, for example, probably the decision that Trump took seriously and he acted upon when he was at the G7 last week in Canada was news through an envoy that the Iranian regime was threatening, or did threaten, President Trump that they would unleash their sleeper terror cells on American soil if Trump took out and joined Israel in airstrikes against Iran's nuclear facility. So when you're dealing with this, and I think this is what triggered Trump to say, okay, if you're going to threaten the United States, the most powerful nation in the world, then we'll take out your nuclear weapons program.
Yeah, it's very, very clear. We've seen in the past couple of years the ilk of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, they actually have a faux influence, right? They have influence over some people, but they don't have moral clarity, and ultimately anyone who listens to them will be dragged into a web of foolishness. They can decry, and they did decry, the strikes. Owens, who posts all sorts of deranged statements against Israel on a routine basis, called Trump's post announcing the bombing utterly deranged herself. But I think he will be able to sleep easy, as indeed will many people across Iran and across Israel, across Europe and the United States. So we're going to see, there's the potential of sleeper cell terrorist attacks that Iran has threatened. But we also have to remember, Simon, how often has Iran made such threats? They've made threat after threat after threat in this conflict. And frankly, I'm beginning to think they don't have any substance to any of their threats.
I mean, also, if you are a kind of jihadi terrorist, knowing that you would then carry out a sleeper cell attack on the United States or against American or Israeli Jewish interests, then there might not be a regime to glorify yourself in, because this regime could collapse within a week. But we really need to thank God for his sovereignty, because history is his story, for raising up Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, together with President Donald Trump, to take the brave and moral decision to attack Iran's nuclear facilities to prevent the world's most dangerous regime having the world's most dangerous weapon.
Absolutely, and to continue to pray that God would continue to give wisdom and that there would be decisive action, that the people of Iran would be emboldened to rise up, and that just as evil Haman in Persia was overthrown after his genocidal plot against the Jews of the day in Esther's time was overthrown, just as Haman was overthrown, so must the Ayatollah be overthrown and come to an end. We're looking at amazing events. Let's continue to pray into them.
No, absolutely. And President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu will go down as history makers who stood in the face of evil and defeated evil. And they've done that through defeating the Iranian nuclear weapons program. That's not only a threat to Israel, not only a threat to the Middle East, not only a threat to Europe, but the world. So thank you for watching Behind the Headlines.